The speech that Rutte gave today, of course, is all about celebrations and all about strength and looking tough. But I'm going to tell you the real deal. So I'm going to break this down into a couple of pieces here. First of all, let's start off, Gary, if you can roll that first part of the tape, and then I'll tell you where to pause.
At the summit in The Hague, I expect allied leaders will agree to spend 5% of GDP on defense. It will be a NATO-wide commitment and a defining moment for the alliance. There are two parts to this new defense spending plan. 3.5% will be invested in our core military requirements, while the rest will go towards defense and security-related investments, including infrastructure and building industrial capacity. Our decisions on defense spending are driven by NATO's battle plans and capability targets. They define what forces and capabilities allies need to provide.
Okay, Gary, if you can stop right there for a second. So what he's talking about there, 5% GDP. It's going to be a defining moment, a quantum leap forward, he says. Okay, let's put this in context here a little bit. Right now, there are, it's better than it was, but still there are 8 NATO countries who aren't even at the 2% level right now. Britain is at 2.5%, and they are going to push really hard to get to 2.8%. They were already stretching their budget to get to that. They're already cutting social services, which was making many people in Great Britain unhappy. This is in the earlier months of this year. Now that you want to double that amount to get to 5%. And then you're going to say, yes, all the nations in Europe need to have that same level of advancement. Where's that money going to come from? If you've had all the pressure that so many administrations in consecutive, going all the way back to the Bush administration, maybe you can even go to the Clinton administration, really. Everybody's always been pushing for this 2%. 8 NATO countries still don't have 2%. Other ones are just barely over the top. And look, it doesn't take a lot of figuring out to say, with all of this pressure, and all of them haven't even gotten to 2, some are just over it, then how are you going to now go up to 5%? I mean, number one, I want to see the devil's in the details. I want to see what the plan is. How long do they propose this is going to be? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? That matters, but that's it. Partially, it doesn't either, because still to get to that point, that means every time, however many years it is, each year to increase defense spending, it is a zero-sum game. Unless you're going to literally borrow your way into death and put all this debt on top of you, unless everybody's going to go into debt. Of course, that also means somebody's going to have to be paying that. Where are you going to get these loans from? At what interest rate and all that? Unless you're going to do it that way, the only other alternative you have is to cut benefits for your country or start taxing the wealthy even more. Both of those are hugely unpopular. Raising taxes on anybody is unpopular, but especially the upper class, the people who have clout and economic power and levers to affect the government, they're going to put a lot of pressure on that, I assure you. And if you go the other direction and say you're going to cut benefits for your people, they're going to let you know that they're not happy about that either. And what's incredibly important about this, when you're talking about going up to that level of spending, if you're going to get your population to make those sacrifices, whether it's to pay more in taxes or to have less in capabilities, they have to recognize a threat that you come to the conclusion that, well, this is unpleasant. I don't want to do this, but if we don't, we run the risk of getting rolled over. And that is where, and I don't know if this was already a plan, but certainly it's going to be used by those now in power to get this through. They keep building up the Russian threat as though they're coming for them. We've seen it on and off throughout this war that if we don't stop Ukraine or Russia and Ukraine, then we're next. There's going to be like Hitler too is going to come rolling down the plains of Germany and cross into France, maybe go to the English Channel, all this kind of nonsense. I mean, that's stuff in a B-grade movie. A badly written one at that. There is no evidence that Russia has any interest, much less capacity to take on the continent of Europe in a big war. Why would they want to do that? See, there has to be a reason. You have to say, you can't just say they're coming after us. You've got to say why they want to do it. For example, in World War II, you can see that Hitler said, I want to roll to the English Channel, and because he keep wanting to take stuff with the Sudetenland first, and then the Anschluss in Austria, then he eventually attacked into Poland. They want more room, or they're worried about this, and so they're having this big force of millions of men, and then they have all the armored capacity and the logistics capabilities and the Air Force, everything that he needed to actually act on this, and then you saw him progressively acting more and more on different countries. That's what it looks like when somebody has the intent and the capacity to act on it, and then the countries around didn't have it. That world no longer exists. In 1938, which is what everybody likes to go back to, there were no nuclear weapons. Nobody had them. So all you had was conventional power. Now, both sides have them. So the chance that anybody's army is going to go rolling across conventionally into another and it not go nuclear is virtually non-existent. Because if Russia were to start rolling, like say through Poland and trying to go into the Baltics and going everywhere, the chances of it not going nuclear are very small, maybe infinitesimally small. And likewise, the same thing. The idea that any Western army is going to roll into Russia anymore is virtually non-existent, because they would use their tactical nuclear weapons. It's in their doctrine. And it was definitely in our doctrine. I served during the Cold War. I know what our doctrine is. I know what if the Russians or the Soviet Union at that time was starting to move further into Western Europe, if they came across the Fulda Gap that I used to help patrol, then we were going to use tactical nuclear weapons. Nobody's changed that. So don't go back and tell me this is 1938 again, because it ain't 1938 and it never will be again. The conditions are very different right now. So you're telling me now, NATO, that you want to build up an army like it's 1938, but you know it's not, and that it would never be able to be used like it was if it had been 1938 because of the presence of nuclear weapons on both sides of the calculation. That's one of the reasons why nations have those, to forestall that very outcome of an allied or foreign army invading into their country. That virtually prohibits that possibility. So then why build up this big conventional force when nuclear weapons can trump anything that you do? I mean, think about the logic of that, folks. You build up, you did say it's 5 years from now or 10, whatever the time frame they've set, and all of a sudden here's all these capabilities, and everybody's spending 5%. Their army's really big, they're training, etc. What are you going to do with it? You think that Russia is going to invade with another big army that they're going to build up to 3 or 4 million, which is what it would take conventionally, and then they're going to come in and then no one's going to use nuclear weapons? That you're going to attack across a broad front on NATO countries, as difficult as that would be anyway, just conventionally even, it'd be really difficult. But if they did, are you going to tell me that the French, the British, or the United States, no one's going to use nuclear weapons and that Russia could just come in? That's why we have to have all this buildup. No, folks, it's not going to. Spend your money where it makes sense, even militarily. This ain't it. And then let me now show you, Gary, if you could bring that video back up here, let me show you specifically what he said they're going to spend the money on.
Last week, NATO defense ministers agreed ambitious new targets. The exact details are classified, but we need a 400% increase in air and missile defense. We see in Ukraine how Russia delivers terror from above. So we will strengthen the shield that protects our skies. Our militaries also need thousands more armored vehicles and tanks, millions more artillery shells. And we must double our enabling capabilities, such as logistics, supply, transportation, and medical support.
Okay, so let's look at what was on the list and what wasn't on the list. So he says we want a 400% increase in air defense. Okay, now that is one identified area that if I was a military anywhere in the world, to include American, and if I was in charge of the U.S., I would say already you are like miles behind for already, and you need to fix that up. If you want to have a conventional deterrent, you damn well better have a better air defense capacity. That is one thing that has been absolutely validated in this war right here, is the side that has the best air defense is almost certainly going to win this. And right now, Russia definitely has the best air defense, because both sides have been launching pretty large forays of missiles and drones going back and forth between the border. And Russia's been able to shoot down a significant portion, a very significant proportion of all those coming in. And the Ukraine side is not shooting down anymore. They used to, but now then the percentages are very, very small. And so nearly everything is getting through, or at least great portions of it. And because Russia has more offensive capacity, they can afford to have a lot shot down and still get the stuff through, whereas the other side can't. So building up your air defense is an important thing. You may recall, I guess it's probably 6 or 8 months ago, one of the NATO leaders, it may have been General Bauer, I can't remember for sure, the deputy commander, but one of the leaders said that, by the way, we have like 15%, it was 5 or 15% of the necessary air defense for all of Western Europe. That was, I couldn't believe they actually said that out loud if it was true, but they should have been working on to get that fixed in. You should have built up in your capacity consistently what you need air defense. I mean, it's not a shock that missiles and drones are now a part of the modern battlefield. And if you don't have the ability to shoot those things down, then you're way behind the power curve. And I don't understand why you would be, because that's self-evident that that's where you should go. What good does it do to have a whole bunch of tanks and artillery platforms if you don't have the air defense to keep them safe? Because you can't operate in this days unless you have a combined arms operation, and that includes air defense, air offense, the air component, the ground component, engineer, all that kind of stuff, any infantry, etc. You got to have all of it. So you can't put all your eggs in just a couple of baskets and just leave the other baskets empty, like air defense. So, okay, fine. Let's go ahead and improve that. That's something that's important there. But then he said we need thousands more tanks and armor personnel carriers, millions more artillery shells, double the logistics and supply capacity. Now, maybe there was other things, and that's just all he mentioned. But the fact that he didn't even mention drone warfare in the midst of all that, at the top of that list, is itself troubling. Have you not paid attention to see that drones are kind of important today? They're arguably now more important than armor and artillery pieces, though they still have a place. They haven't gone away. The age of the tank isn't dead, but its place in the hierarchy is. When I fought in an armored tank battle against Iraq in 1991, armor was the absolute pinnacle and the king of the battle. It wasn't artillery like it had been in previous wars. Artillery was important, and it did play a big role in there. But armor, tanks, infantry personnel carriers, the Bradley fighting vehicles with their tow launcher, those were the kings right there. In fact, when we went into battle, I'll never forget this, Doug McGregor, who we have on our show all the time, he was the S3, what's called the operations officer in charge of our cavalry squadron. And he told all of us before we went there, the safest place to be on this battlefield is in an M1 tank with your gun tube pointing right toward the enemy, because the frontal armor on that thing could defeat anything that the Soviet era stuff, the T-72s, the T-55s that the Iraqi side had. And he said the safest place to be is going straight toward the enemy, because there's virtually nothing they can do to stop you. And that's exactly how it played out. That ain't the case anymore. Now then, you have to be worried about the drones. Now then, a $2,000 or $3,000 drone can take out that $6, $7, $8 million, $10 million M1 tank. So we have to worry about it. Now you can't lead with the tank anymore. You got to have it, but you can't lead with it. That should have been the number one thing on this list, is the drone issue. Because if you can't master the drone issue, then you can't use your tanks, you can't use your APCs or your infantrymen effectively. So that tells you right now the thinking isn't even right, that wasn't listed first among those other things there.